Okay, let's go.
Monsieur Anber.
Monsieur Cassavin, how are you, brother?
Doing well. I have to remember to transfer my water bottle into the rival mug. I don't have the big cheese on mine, but I have my name, and I should do that. I forget. If I don't drink tea, I tend to not use the mug, but it can actually be used for any sort of drinks, right?
This, of course, it can, but this actually, I look forward to actually having a tea, and I was making a tea before we got on, so I look forward to having it. So the fact that we do this and I can share it with you, I'm very excited.
Yes, absolutely. It's a tradition, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Calling Russ Anber podcast here, available on YouTube. And some people have been asking me, when is it going to be audio on Spotify and Apple? It's in the works. Patience. Thank you very much for those of you who've been asking, and it's a good problem to have, and the demand is going to be met in a matter of weeks. As far as Russ, also, people who would like to tune in to a special edition interview with Savannah Marshall, who fought this past weekend and won her defended her WBO middleweight title, and again by knockout victory, this time against Maria Lindbergh, that I saw lose to Marie-Ève Dicaire in Montreal at the casino a few years ago. And on that card, there was also Ebony Bridges against Shannon Courtenay for the bantamweight title that ended up being a heck of a fight. And those are some of the early results. But Savannah Marshall, I really invite people to tune in to that interview. She was a wonderful character. And I know, Russ, you had talked to her a little bit before, but I think you can say really an impressive individual, Savannah Marshall, in and out of the ring.
You know what? I'm going to say something to you that I thought about only afterwards. And I almost feel bad that I didn't mention this earlier, but I have a soft spot for that type of character of a fighter. And after we did the interview, I said, this is almost a female version of Otis Grant. And, somebody who's not into the fanfare, not into the hype, not into, all the crazy stuff, just does his business. And, ever since my father spoke to me about Joe Louis, that's been the type of fighter that I admire. The guy who comes to fight, who's done the work, who's not looking to have, and in her case, not looking to have accolades for anything other than her accomplishments. Right. And, that was very much the same with Otis. And I mean, I had Otis since he was 13 years old. And I don't know why, but I just have a weakness as a man for that type. Those are the type of fighters that attract me, whether it's Loma, whether it's Usyk, whether it's, Savannah, whether it's Katie Taylor. These are the type that I'm attracted to, the ones who come and do their business and want to be credited on their performances and their accomplishments and their achievements. And their conduct is exemplary. And boxing needs fighters whose conducts are exemplary. So I've always believed that.
And Russ, the reason I'm laughing here a little bit is that, or smirking, I should say, is that based on those statements, I agree with you. But this is the week where you're going to have Saturday night Jake Paul against Ben Askren. So we're at the far extreme on the opposite side of what you just spoke of. We'll get to that later on. We'll get to Demetrius Andrade defending his title as well. But Russ, let's go to some of the previous results from this past weekend, other than, of course, Savannah Marshall's win. I want to start with go ahead.
Before you do, I think this is something because we're touching on something, and I love the way you're able to bring out things in me and organically develop a conversation. You're right that, the pendulum has swung, and somewhere along the line, and, this could go back to as far as Ali's days, where he said he was influenced by Gorgeous George, the wrestler, in being flamboyant. And I think somewhere along the line with the evolution of WWF wrestling, or WWE as it's called now, the evolution of that, the characters, the models, all this kind of stuff, the way television started playing a role in not just televising the fight, but almost choreographing the event, choreographing the weigh-ins, have a stare down, and all these things. What time you got to come out? Okay, we got to walk. Here's the music, all this stuff, instead of just, okay, let's go walk, and the fights, we're going to concentrate on the fight. That changed dramatically, and so did fighters. And, so I guess maybe it's just from what I have come up and seen, not only in boxing, but in all sports. And you'll appreciate this in terms of even hockey, where, it used to be, whether it was in Chicago or Montreal, it was the organist who played the music. And now you've got lights, you've got music, you've got them shooting T-shirts out of a gun, like there's
Not this
all.
year.
What's that?
Not this year, or not since COVID.
You know what I mean? Yeah, obviously, right. But it seems like everything done to actually distract or take your attention away from the product on the field. And we put more emphasis and money and spend on things that don't improve the product on the field, but they become a spectacle. And you mentioned Jake Paul and Askren. This is where the pendulum has swung to the spectacle part of it, of people using their fame, if you will, from something totally different and bringing it to take place in a boxing ring, and commissions allowing that to happen. So it's just crazy times, bro. It's just crazy times.
Well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it a little bit later on in the fight itself and everything that surrounds it. Of course, with the big pay-per-view event, it's going to be, like you mentioned, not only a spectacle for the fight of Paul and Askren, but all the shows, the hip hop artists that are going to be planned and lined up all night. It's going to be kind of like an award show mixed in with some celebrity boxing. It's going to be a happening spot. Apparently, Saturday night, you're going to see it all over social media, whether we like it or not. But a fight that I think everybody agreed that merited the social media attention it deserved and received this past Saturday was the Joe Smith-Max Vlasov fight. A war, really, between two men that going into was kind of a fight that you expected could happen. Some people thought Vlasov may not be able to withstand the punishment of Joe Smith. It may have been more of a one-sided fight, but he clearly demonstrated that the reason he had never been knocked down in over 40 professional fights, he has an iron chin. He also had a style that landed many clean punches to Joe Smith. And at one point towards the later stages, you thought maybe Joe Smith was going to lose this fight, maybe even be stopped at one point. But then in the 11th round, he kind of like summoned this courageous effort. And I think probably in the last 2 rounds ended up getting the scorecards in his favor. I don't know if you agree with that synopsis of the fight, but I thought it was a heck of a performance and really one of those at the end. It was tough to find a clear winner despite Joe Smith getting the decision.
I don't remember, but I don't remember what we said, but I remember watching the fight saying, this might be quite similar to the fight we called when we previewed it on last week's show. And I said all the things I said about Joe Smith. He doesn't bring a lot to the ring. You don't look at him and say, wow, oh my God, this is the greatest talent I've ever seen. But boy, he brings his lunch bucket, doesn't he? He brings his lunch box, and he comes to fight. He's pure blue collar, and he tries, and whatever he lacks in skill or speed or experience or amateur background, he more than makes up for it with heart and courage and determination. And there is nobody ends up looking good against Vlasov. There's just it doesn't happen. That style, difficult to hit. It's just a tough fight. One of the reasons he probably got hit the way he did by Smith, and it was almost, thank God for that for Smith, was because he takes those chances with his hands down, and something at some point, just by timing, the odds is that you throw something, it's going to land because it's unprotected. And that might have saved Joe Smith, but he's so difficult to hit. And I think it made for a fantastically entertaining fight. And he's a throwback guy, this kid. You got to give him credit. He's a real throwback. He tries hard. He made everything that Vlasov had against him. He was able to not everything, but he neutralized it. He found a way to still make it difficult, still put Vlasov through the ringer, still try to, even that shot in the 11th round, which, was like they called it, a back of the head shot. It was back of the head, borderline on how, one guy's ducking, was it an intentional, but they call it a knockdown. One judge scores it a knockdown. Now, why did he do that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that 10-8. This is getting a bit maybe somewhat ridiculous, I think, because you're seeing it also in MMA where they're giving rounds 10-8 without any knockdown or severe domination. But I want to hear your take on it.
Well, that's good. I'm glad because I thought about that. Well, let's circle back on that. But I just want to finish my thought on the fact that, all of a sudden Joe's making this happen. Oh my God, here he comes, round 11, round 12, and it was tough. I mean, I didn't score the fight round by round. And through the fight, I was getting the feeling, which is usually right, that I thought Vlasov was pulling away on points. And then those last 2 rounds made up for it, makes you forget a little bit what happened earlier, and it ends up being a very, very close fight. I'm not going to say it was a robbery. Robbery could be strong. I thought it was a close fight, and those are the types of fights when, the scoring system in boxing really has you look at fights differently, and fans can realize that. Don't just wait for a fight to end to determine the winner, because that's not how you determine the winner. It's scored by rounds, and you get a much greater interest in watching each round when you score each round and you put it on paper. When I used to go to baseball games, I used to love to keep score. I loved it. I mean, that was almost as much fun as going to the game itself, because you felt like you're part of the game. You felt like you're managing in there, and scoring, you feel like you're part of it. And sometimes at the end, in most cases, you can kind of have an idea who you pick to win. But when they're close fights and heated, it makes a difference what you've put on that card. So to circle back to what you said, Matt, about the 10-8 round, everybody, this guy scores a fight for no reason, a 10-8 round. That was not a 10-8 round. Unless he felt the referee was wrong and made the bad call. So he vetoed the referee's decision, right?
That makes sense to me. That's the only thing that makes sense to me out of the.
But he has no right really to veto the referee's decision. I don't know.
Very rare you see that. It's
very rare you see that.
If the referee makes a flagrant mistake completely, then I think it's a bit more justified. But I believe it's discouraged in the internal meetings to do it. Like, you're still supposed to follow the referee's official ruling. Especially
when you consider he gives him the timeout to recover because he felt it was a foul blow, just the same way like a low blow would have been. The question here is, you're giving a guy a 10-8 round without a knockdown being scored. Sometimes they give a 10-9 round when a knockdown is scored, and you jump all over me when I say, why aren't you scoring 10-10 rounds?
The 10-10, you've been on the 10-10 round train for a little while there, Russ.
But it has to be. It's impossible. You cannot tell me that in all these fights that you've been watching in your relative short career, my long career, you watch fights, go ahead and reach back and pull out scorecards of fights all over the place, and you can't find a 10-10 round. What you're telling me?
No, I agree with you. You can find a 10-10 round, but I'm saying it seems like it's just a battle that you're not going to win, or I'm not going to win if we want to have the 10-10. It seems like it's ingrained between these judges and the media that 10-10, only like the first round is even considered to give a 10-10 round, which is bizarre because when it's a narrow, thin decision, like you said, how can it not be 10-10, but a domination round is 10-8?
Or sometimes 10-9. You could have a dominating round, like a real beat the guy up round, but you don't knock him down, and it's 10-9. And you have a feel-out round in which nobody throws anything. You land a jab maybe at the end of the first round, they give you the round 10-9. The two 10-9s do not reflect the reality of what you saw, and I think that's bad in boxing.
Russ, what about a round that's extremely close, but back and forth action nonstop? That's where I think most people don't really give 10-10s. They usually try to go one way or the next, but you would be open to having a 10-10 round, even if it's an all-out war in the round, right?
Why not? That's probably even more so. Guys getting rocked, he gets rocked, the other guy gets rocked, bing, bang, rock'em, sock'em robots. Why can't it be an even round?
I think it's because they probably look at it and say, you know what, that was such a tough beating physically for both men. We got to give somebody. You have to have won something from that round, right? But look, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'm just saying you agree that it's very uncommon, and then you brought it up in the first point by they attack you, the people who see your scorecards when you want to implement 10-10 rounds. They disagree, right? You're in the minority of people who wants to go with the 10-10 scorecard.
The minority doesn't mean you're wrong.
No, definitely not. Usually it's actually the opposite. If you're going on the other side of the trend, you're in a good spot.
Here's the thing. The proof is that not scoring 10-10 rounds is an impossibility, that the judges are rendering their verdict and saying that a guy won the round. He won the round. Not saying you didn't win it, but you didn't lose it. They're saying he won. And with all the fights we've seen, world championship fights all over the world that discourage a 10-10 round, it is mathematically impossible that you did not have an even round. Somebody did not deserve to win that, or the other guy deserved it to win it just as much. It shouldn't be I love the saying, swing round. Could have gone either way. That means it's even. That's exactly what it means. What do you mean? You could just score it either way, how you like. You can't take away people's livelihood because, hey, could have gone either way. Give it to him or give it to him, whichever you feel like it. Based on what? It was an even round. Let them earn the round. Let the rounds be clean. I think we end up getting better decisions that way.
It's good. Early rant of the night. Now, in terms of Joe Smith fighting competition going forward, the natural link with Top Rank that was discussed before the fight. If he did win, was to face off against Artur Beterbiev later in the year. Artur, of course, that you know extremely well. You know that fight is a possibility. And Joe Smith, by the time we record this podcast, had posted a picture on his own personal page of a poster of a possible showdown with Artur Beterbiev. Does anything from the Vlasov fight change your opinion of what a Beterbiev-Smith fight would look like prior to Saturday night?
No, I think, first of all, I think both guys are coming off fights in which they may not have looked at their very best. There certainly was, the layoff, 17-month layoff for Beterbiev, layoffs for Smith, cancellation, train to get ready, cancel the last minute, get ready again. Fought a very awkward style. I think I'm going to, at least in this case, while Beterbiev fought, Dennis who's a southpaw, and that makes a problem. So that's problematic. And then Joe Smith fighting a guy who, like I said, nobody's going to look good against. You're not going to fight Vlasov and say, you know what, I want this fight because this style will make me look good. No, it's not going to make you look good. That's a tough style to fight against. So I think it makes it very interesting, and I don't think it takes away from 1 second of how dangerous Joe Smith could be and how vulnerable. And the same thing for Beterbiev, So I think and both guys, like, this is not a case of one guy being, tricky dicky and slip. He's not trying to do that. They're trying to throw shots and land. So I think it makes for a fantastically exciting fight, which might be short-lived. Who knows? But boy, I'll tell you what, the atomic bombs are going to be dropping.
Okay, well, look, I think that's a fair analysis, but I wonder at what point does Joe Smith's drive, his competitiveness, his endurance, it's all fun and good. It's a great asset for him, but it can also mean he's been taking some shots. And I just wonder, not only with the fight that he's been having inside the ring, but you probably can imagine sparring sessions also at times that people don't necessarily see, but that ages a fighter as well. Sometimes those are even bigger punishment in the long term, the sparring sessions that can happen in the gym, than the actual fights themselves. I just think if he takes the amount of punches he took against Vlasov, against a guy like Artur Beterbiev, it's a bad strategy. It just, obviously it's a bad strategy, but it's also going not to go the way he expects it. No matter how Iron Chin he is, I don't think Beterbiev lands as many, even half of the blows Vlasov did. I don't see it going more than a few rounds. Probably, and some would say the other way also might apply, that if Smith tags Beterbiev early, yeah, it's a different fight, of course, than what Arthur's used to. I mean, it's a fascinating result of two men with sheer force who probably is able to dominate that evening. But I really think on paper, based on the results of this past weekend, I think Arthur must be feeling pretty confident if that matchup were to happen.
Well, I'm gonna look at this at a slightly different from you, who's thinking that maybe, Joe Smith takes punishment, gets hit. How long can the body take that? Okay, that's one way to look at it. I'm looking at it the way the old timers used to look at it and say, you win a belt, you've just become 25% better. That kid was so happy to win that belt, the emotion that he shared with his team in the dressing room, Jerry Capobianco and his brother, what they shared, and he dedicated that belt to his trainer. And these are guys who believed in Joe and they love him. They just became 25% better. Their confidence just went up 100%. So I'm expecting to see, as good as we've seen Joe Smith be able to perform in the past, I'm expecting to see him get even better, because there's something about becoming, champion on a split decision or majority decision, whatever it was, and hearing the words "and the new," I think that changes you as a man. It changes you as a fighter, and I'm banking on the fact that mentally, if not physically, mentally, Joe Smith just got better, and he starts walking around like the champion of the world. So yeah, I'm going with that. I think he's gotten better.
Great point. And I don't know about the 25% or what percentage exactly Boots Ennis is going to feel better after his knockout win over Sergey Lipinets the same evening, but at 147 pounds, because it was such a dominating performance over a man, Sergey Lipinets, who has been a tough fight. Even in a fight against Castillo Clayton earlier in the year that I thought Castillo won, and many did, it wasn't the type of punishment nearly that he took against Boots Ennis, who really seems to be from orthodox to southpaw, capable of switching, and it makes it a fun, interesting perspective of the welterweights up and comers. When you look at Stanionis, who won on the undercard of the Boots Ennis fight against Lipinets, Stanionis defeats Thomas Delorme. It's not an easy opponent. Delorme fought even better than I anticipated, but Stanionis just physically demanding. And then Virgil Ortiz a few weeks ago showing his skills. So the 147-pound division, Russ, is looking pretty good for the up and comers, especially when you consider at the top you still have the Keith Thurmans, the Errol Spence, and the Terrence Crawfords of the world.
As it should be. There are certain things that should be in life, water, air, these are food. These are certainties you should have. And in the boxing world, the welterweight and middleweight division are supposed to be the best divisions in boxing, the most consistent, the most talent laden. They're the right weight. It's a right weight for a skilled man who's a fighter. Like that's where greatness lies, in those divisions, and historically have proven to be some of the toughest weight classes in which you could win a world title, in an era when there was only some world titles, not the plethora of them that there are now. It's almost now that how can you not win a world title? It's almost gotten to that. But
before you continue on the welterweight division, because you just reminded me of something. How, for those of you who may not know this, like, it started out with 2 belts, the WBA and the WBC. Am I correct? At the time, those were the 2 official championship belts?
It started out with 1. It started out with, there used to be 1 world champion per weight class. We know that, right?
You remember which belt sanctioning body, or was it not even one of the 4 that's in that's active right now?
Well, it was, and now I need to freshen up my history on this, because it's cloudy, but the WBA, I believe, was around longer, and I believe they became they emerged from being. Now, did the WBC come from the NBA?
So I might have. Okay, well, we'll have to look it up, because I might have caught you off guard there. But it went from 1 to 2 belts.
One to the other. So in the modern era of what we've been accustomed to. So when I say the modern era, I'm pointing more to your time on this earth than mine. But even in mine, when I started in boxing in 1979, there were 2 world champions, the WBA champion and the WBC champion. And you never thought that the 2 would not meet. So like, it's okay. It almost was as if, okay, this group, this body believes this guy's the best. This body believes this guy's the best. They're going to fight a little bit, and then they're going to meet to become the undisputed champion of the world, like a Hagler, etc. So Hearns and Leonard, one was WBA, one was WBC. It almost made sense to have 2 world champions that would eventually face off with each other. So, we had 2. Now it's to the point where each of the existing organizations, of which there are 4 major ones, but if you really wanted to get into and start counting WBF and IBO and the others, it's even more, but 4 major ones. And among those 4, some of these organizations have 3 world titles in each weight class, and the one in the same organization. And then you've got your interims and silvers and regulars, and it's gotten a little out of hand of how many there are. But yeah, there used to be 2, and the divisions of the welterweights and the middleweights that was when boxing was king, and of course the heavyweight champion of the world was always very important. But the heavyweights had, in my opinion, had more ebb and flow in the quality of its champion than the welterweight and middleweights did. You know, the welterweights and middleweights, it's almost like you always had a good champion. Whoever was there was good, and the contenders were good. And on any given night, one of those contenders could have been champion. So, it's those are in my opinion, the glamour division. I'm glad the welterweight division is as it is today. And I look forward to more great fights. I just hope we get them.
And what about Boots Ennis and Virgil Ortiz from your experience as a trainer and manager's perspective? People see results like they've did in the past few weeks, whether it was Ortiz against Maurice Hooker and Ennis against Lipinets, and they win by such dominant fashion, physically dominant. They want to see these fighters already up against the elite of the division. Now, in the case of Boots Ennis and Virgil Ortiz, do you see, like Terence Crawford was ringside when Virgil Ortiz won? Boots Ennis is open to fight the best, he said, even right away. Do you think they're ready for that step up already, the Deshaun Porters, Keith Thurmans of the world, or do you think they need a fight or two still before they get to that level?
Matt, in this day and age, it's hard to say. I mean, you can always say that, oh, he needs more seasoning. Oh, he needs more work. Oh, he hasn't beat anybody. But I remember, you know, back in the day when Tyson was coming up and people said, oh, he hadn't fought anybody. Well, you know what? It doesn't matter. Just because you haven't fought anybody doesn't mean you can't fight. So, you know, I think a win over Lipinets is a major statement for Boots Ennis. I think his win is probably maybe a tad more impressive than Maurice Hooker, you know, than beating Maurice Hooker. Is he ready for a Terence Crawford? Well, you'd have to say, on paper, you have to say no, because I mean, or Porter or whatever. I mean, these guys are at the top of their game, having fought the top of the opposition. Are they a danger to eventually take the mantle from these guys? I think absolutely. So I think it's a case of how you move them and seeing them in the gym. And I remember, you know, when I was working with Wilder, and I still believe this till today, you know, sometimes you want to take what they call a step-up fight. But I'm of the opinion, as a trainer, if there's any questions I might have about my fighter, I want those questions answered in the gym before I put him in the step-up fight. You know, I don't want to be exposing my guy, you know, and not knowing the answer. I want to be like a lawyer that even though I ask you the question, I already know the answer to that question. So you can't lie to me. You can't tell me something that I don't already know. And I think that you don't want questions answered. If there's something you're not sure about your fighter, find out in the gym. So whenever I see, like, for example, a Ryan Garcia taking certain fights, I always think to myself, nah, he's with good people. They're not putting him in to say, I wonder what he's going to do. They know what he's going to do. So that's the way I kind of look at it.
It's a great point, because fans, a lot of times, that's where they get excited. Oh, there's a bit of suspense, even against Luke Campbell. Look, he won it by, not one, but he knocked down Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia, though, showed a lot of resilience and determination and skill in coming up off the canvas and winning. So probably along the way, you're right, that the trainers and the team knows internally, hey, even if it gets to some adversity at one point in this bout, he'll be able to overcome it. It's a great point.
That's what they learned. Like in that fight, if we just to prove my point, I'm sure they weren't expecting Luke Campbell to nearly decapitate Garcia with that shot. I'm sure they weren't expecting that. But that's where he answered a question in, can I come back? Can I pick myself up off the canvas? And when he did, everything else he did in the fight, I think they expected him to do. They knew he had the capacity to do it. So you end up answering. That became a step up for him, because he answered, his head nearly got ripped off, and he got back up to come back and win, So they knew what they were doing. That's the right way to do things.
Well said. Now there's some fights this weekend, a lot of action, boxing, MMA, combat sports, and of course a ton of entertaining matchups. And one of those reasons, Russ, if you are entertained by the prospect of these fights and you might like to place a little wager, well, we got some news for you, and we got an interesting offer. If you'd like to, you like me to say, Russ?
Yeah, please say it, because I only know about they're going to match your offer up to $600. That's what I like.
You're going too far ahead here. So it's sign up at bet99.com. It's Canada's newest online sports book and casino. You can be sure to check out their player props, bet builder, their risk-free live bet bonuses. And if you use the code BOXING99 This is where Russ was kind of hinting at. If you use the code Boxing99, you get a sports welcome offer, the deposit match of 100% up to $600. With the amount of action that's taking place over this weekend, definitely something to consider. And the Jake Paul Ben Askren fight, I'm sure, is going to draw a lot of attention. We'll get to that one in a second, but let's finish with some boxing stuff first.
Let me get this straight though about this bet thing. So if somebody comes along and places a bet, me and you are fighting, they place a bet on you to win for $600. They'll match that bet, which now makes the bet $1,200. And if you upset the odds, because you'd be a 7-1 underdog, right? If you upset the odds and beat me, they're going to pay you 7-1 of the $1,200 bet.
That's what it looks like. It's a great deal, but you have to use the code Boxing99. If not, the $600 of your pocket, you're taking all the risk. Right. Now, okay, so Demetrius Andrade is fighting against Luke Williams, but what about Brian Perella fighting in the junior middleweight division against Tony Harrison Saturday night in the main event on another card, opposite to some of these other shows here? And Roy Jones doing pads with Brian Perella. Did you speak to Roy at all about this?
I haven't spoken to him about it. I did not speak to him about it. I meant to. We spoke a couple of weeks ago, but we didn't talk about that. But I saw that he's working with him. And, you know, this is an important test for both guys, for Perella and Harrison. Perella, you know, was having that great performance in his last fight, winning all the way through, looking good, looking like the prospect they expect him to be. And then, you know, with literally seconds remaining on the clock, he gets clipped, gets stopped, and the referee stops the fight. Jack, my friend Jack. Now his name escapes me.
Reese, I just told you, Jack Reese.
Jack Reese.
Yeah, I thought you were joking because I said the last name and then you were just going Jack.
Oh, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Yeah, Jack Reese. The name slip. It's been so long since we've seen each other with this COVID. But Jack stopped the fight with seconds remaining, like literally seconds remaining, if any. They actually
one officially.
And you know, that's something to come back from. You know, for Brian Perella, he has to be a good guy, classy guy, good team around him. You know, honest laborer. He does his job. He comes to work, comes to fight. And Harrison as well. You know, after winning the title and then losing it. I was with Tony Harrison in Austria when he was there as a sparring partner. I know him; he's a good fighter. You know, this is a really tough fight. This is a case of, you know, a good matchup. This is a tough fight for both guys. It's not an easy out for either one. It's a tough fight. And, you know, again, this is the kind of fight that we used to be accustomed to seeing. You know, hard to pick a winner. There might be a slight favorite, maybe Harrison going into the fight as a slight favorite, but it's an interesting fight. And, you know, there's some demons, I think, especially that Perella has to shake to continue on.
While we're on the subject of referee stoppages towards the end of fights, I don't think I've ever heard your take on the Chavez Sr., Meldrick Taylor, Richard Steele stoppage. That's probably the most well-known, debatable, of course, stoppage in the last seconds of a fight. The consensus is that it was a bad decision. Do you agree with the consensus, or did you have a different take at the time, or now years removed from it?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you could easily make an argument both ways. The body language definitely was not there for Meldrick. You know, he didn't look to be showing the referee, I'm ready to go. He looked like, you know, as if to say, there's only a few seconds, you know, let me get through this. You know, I can stand up for a few seconds. And that's what I think Lou Duva, who I remember went crazy, you know, when they stopped that fight. But, you know, the body language wasn't there. He never showed that he wanted to fight. And it's interesting that you say that, because in the fight with Brian Perella and Jack Reese signaled for Perella to do certain things. He said, move here, move there. Perella responded, and he still stopped the fight. He saw something that he didn't like, and he stopped the fight with seconds remaining, probably with 1 second remaining, which, technically speaking, by the time the opponent would have come out of the neutral corner, he probably wouldn't have reached Perella before the bell rang. And in the case of Meldrick Taylor and Chavez, Richard Steele, I believe, was the referee.
He was.
The light was on, which is a really good thing that they have. I don't know if they do that anymore, but there's a red light that comes on in the corner to indicate to the referee that there's 10 seconds left. You know, when there's 10 seconds at the end of the round, they tap on the ring apron to let the referee know. So he moves into position to stop the action when the bell rings. And when he was counting, that light was visible. Now, he might not have known exactly how many seconds are left in the round, but he knows he's down to the last 10 of a hotly disputed contest in which Chavez was bringing it. Like we think only about that knockdown, you know, and does he survive? But there was a lot of punches that poor Meldrick took that, you know, he suffers from today as a result. But he took a lot of bad shots leading up to that point. You know, those punches started to hurt. You know, I mean, he was really getting to him. But no one, I don't think anybody would have complained if Steele calls the fight with 45 seconds left to go in the round. I don't think anybody questions the stoppage. They question it because they're saying there was only seconds left and, you know, you could have let him finish it out. So there you go.
Well, I think you made a very good analysis there. Not much I can add to it. Let's go to Demetrius Andrade fighting this Saturday, because we just briefly touched on Perella. But Andrade, who's undefeated, defending his WBO middleweight title. He's 29-0 and waiting for one of those big names in the middleweight division. I would love to see him fight Triple G at this stage of Triple G's career, where Triple G seems to be a little bit in no man's land at the moment. He's fighting Demetrius Andrade. He's defending his title against Liam Williams, not Luke, which I made a mistake earlier.
Luke is the writer.
Right, exactly. Our friend. Now, in terms of Andrade versus Liam Williams, I don't see how Andrade loses this fight. Maybe I'm wrong. There's upsets, of course, that happen in the history of boxing. But is there anything from Williams' style that leads you to believe that he can really do something to, you know, put the fight in his favor? I don't see, unless Andrade has a completely night off, I don't see how he doesn't escape with a victory Saturday night.
You know, I've seen Andrade fight since he was an amateur. Like, and when I say an amateur, I'm talking like 12 years old, 13 years old, and he was good then. Listen, the kid's talented. I think if you have to pick somebody out in the boxing world to say that this guy has so much talent and seems to be flying under the radar, it's Demetrius Andrade. And it's too bad, because for the talent he has, he should be involved in so many big fights, and he should be part of the big name discussions, like you said. And I wonder at times if it's the politics of boxing or something else that prevent him from getting the fights that he should be getting, because he's skilled, he's talented, he's gifted, and he's just not on anybody's lips. And sometimes you wonder, is he so good that people are just trying to treat him with the attitude, let's ignore him and maybe he'll go away. You know, like let's ignore that he exists. Let's not pay him any attention. And maybe we can forget that he ever existed and we don't have to worry about him. Because I'll tell you what, you put him in right now with Triple G, and Triple G is in for a fight of his life.
Oh, fight of his life, you think? Yeah, it would definitely be I think it's as close to a toss-up matchup as you're going to get right now. And probably Andrade would be favored because of the youth on his side. I also think Andrade, if you recall, HBO made a push for him early in his career, like in 2013. So we're talking about 8 years ago. And then he kind of stagnated at a certain point for Andrade, and DAZN and stuff. They're giving him opportunities. I hope he lands a big fight, provided he wins against Liam Williams on Saturday night. Because I think, like you mentioned, at 33 years of age, he's still in his prime, but you don't want him to get that shot only late in his career, which you see a lot at times happen with fighters who don't bring the risk to reward ratio on the reward side. They look at it too much as a risk for many opponents.
I just sometimes wonder, I don't know enough about it, but I just sometimes wonder if he hasn't been, whether through fault of his own or not, I don't know. So I don't want to say, but I just wonder if he's been the victim of being blackballed, you know, of being either for decisions he might have made, for fights that he didn't want to take, or just because of his style and how difficult a fight he would be. It's almost as if everybody's put the malocchio on him, you know, and said, no, we're gonna stay away from this guy. So, because really, for as long as he's been around and for the talent he has and undefeated, geez, he should be on everybody's lips, don't you think?
100%. And he is with the hardcore boxing fans. He is with some of the other casual boxing fans. And if he can stay relevant and continue winning these fights, hopefully the opportunity will come. But he's not going to get as much media attention as he should with this fight Saturday night, because although I believe, if I read correctly, he might be fighting, and they're going to try and time it where his fight is over before the Jake Paul Ben Askren main event, and that pay-per-view, which also features Steve Cunningham, who we know very well from fighting in boxing for many years. And he's fighting Frank Mir, a former UFC heavyweight champion, in a boxing match. Regis Prograis is fighting Ivan Redkach. Now, that's a legitimate 140-pound fight in boxing. But then Jake Paul, Ben Askren. So, Russ, do you want to say anything about the undercard first? You want me to give you kind of a briefing here on Jake Paul, who you saw against Nate Robertson up close, of course, when you were in the corner for Roy Jones versus Mike Tyson. But I don't think you know anything about Ben Askren. Even if Ben Askren were to walk down the street with a Ben Askren t-shirt, I'm not sure you'd recognize him. I could be wrong. Do you have any thoughts before I get to the main event of Jake Paul, Ben Askren?
You wouldn't be wrong, and not for any disrespect, but for Andrade, I wanted to ask you a question before we got this. Have you ever heard somebody, and we hear, whether it's through social media, whether it's on-air interviews, fighters always yelling about, I want to fight him, I call this guy out, I want to call that guy. They fight. Has anybody ever said, hey, I want to fight Demetrius Andrade?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. Like
it wasn't very loud. It wasn't trending, that's for sure.
No, it certainly wasn't. So yeah, he's a tough out, man. He's a tough guy to fight. It's a hard night. It's not an easy style. It's somebody, boy, when you're a manager of a fighter, you look at the top 10 list and he goes on the blacklist. Not him, we stay away from him. That's not, we don't want to fight him. You do everything to maneuver your fighter around somebody like that, because it's not a style that blends well. But, he's a good fighter, and I hope he gets his just due. So, yes, go ahead. With that thought, I'll pass it on.
I saw how much Jake Paul, Ben Askren flew over your head with and rightly so that you want to talk about Demetrius Andrade more. But believe it or not, this is getting so many eyeballs already with the social media reaction it's getting leading up to the fight Saturday night and the pay-per-view event, the spectacle with the shows and the hip-hop artists and whatnot. But I think what I'm seeing is that the boxing fans, and you talked about World Wrestling before, it seems like the boxing and MMA fans who are also WWE fanatics, it was WrestleMania last week, they got a lot of attention, they enjoy these events much more than the boxing fans who don't really fall into the trash talking and the spectacle of it as much. That's the feeling I'm getting. The MMA and boxing fans who also enjoy wrestling, and I think of our friends Dan Raphael and Mike Coppinger, they enjoyed this Jake Paul matchup a lot more than people like who watch mostly just boxing, I believe, like me and you. Do you think that's fair, or do you have any different take on it?
It's a good question, Matt. It's a very good question. I'd be lying to you if I said I don't want to see it and I don't want to, see the result. Would I pay for it? No, I'm not. I wouldn't pay for it. If I get to see it, watch a stream, see it on YouTube, whatever, will I watch? Yeah, I'm going to finish watching Demetrius Andrade first. I'm not going to switch over to watch that because it's almost like a train wreck. You kind of want to see what happens. But I can't I'll never be able to look at it the same way I would look at a real fight and appreciate the talent before me that I'm seeing. I'm going to watch it because it's two guys who really are not very good, are putting on gloves and are going to try to smash each other. And likely there could be a massive knockout. When I say not very good, meaning boxing wise, in terms of what they've done on the world stage in boxing, which is they haven't. Combatants, Askren certainly is, and from what I'm hearing has looked very good in training. Jake Paul, has worked hard. I'll give him that, he's working hard. He looks like he's punching hard. I mean, I wouldn't say that just based on his last knockout performance, but you could see that he comes to throw and he's solid and he likes what he's doing, and he's building a career of trying to be a boxer already at the top level instead of having to just fly under the radar and come up through a 4-rounder and see how he does, and nobody pays any attention to it, and it's irrelevant until he gets to 17-0, and they say, "Yo, this kid can fight, man. He's undefeated now. He just won the USBA title or something." North American champion, like he's coming along. No, he's flying right there in the main event right away in what will be his second pro fight. And again, you have to wonder who had this kind of exposure and who did this kind of thing in their second pro fight for this kind of money and getting the talk that they're getting. I mean, I don't know, some of the greatest fighters in the world with their greatest amateur achievements may not have done this, So I'm split on how I feel about it, because we always sometimes think about maintaining the traditions of boxing and what it should be, and yes, but boxing always has been about selling tickets, and these guys just found a new way to sell tickets, and they took their sport or their fame from elsewhere and found a way to cause a beef with somebody. And you got to credit KSI and Logan Paul for starting this, as gamers, that they're going to settle a beef in a boxing ring, and that's how they're going to settle it. And now it seems to be the trend, and that's what people are going to start to do. They're going to get into arguments somewhere and say, okay, we're going to settle it in the boxing ring. I guess there could be worse ways of settling it, right?
100%. Now, Jake Paul, to be clear, is his third officially pro fight, not his second. He had defeated the first KSI. Here's the thing. Jake Paul looks like people who has sparred. He's taking training camp seriously. It seems like he's taking the boxing endeavor seriously, even though he's shortcutted his way to opportunities that well-deserved fighters will not get, no matter how hard they try. Now, Jake Paul, Jean Pascal, we know very well, was one of the sparring partners. He believes Jake Paul's going to win. Zab Judah believes Jake Paul's going to win. So these are credible boxing names. And then you look at the MMA fighter in Ben Askren. He went to do some boxing with Freddie Roach. GSP was there. GSP, of course, one of the best fighters in UFC and MMA history. But Gabriel Rosado, a pro boxer, seen some footage with coaching up and talking up some strategy with Ben Askren. Here's what I'm going to tell you, Russ, because I don't know how much you know about Ben Askren's career. I joked a little bit about that you don't know much at all.
It's not a joke.
He's an NCAA wrestler. Great, he had a great career in MMA, mostly as a wrestler in Bellator. Then get to his career late into UFC. He gets knocked out by Jorge Masvidal. He gets hurt by a guy named Robbie Lawler. Look, Ben Askren has demonstrated one thing: his striking in MMA and UFC was terrible. His defense and his chin suspect. So, as much as I would want Ben Askren, and Ben, please do us a favor and give us a break from Jake Paul here, because we're going to have to live through months and months of Jake Paul winning tour and momentum and social media if you lose, especially if you get knocked out. But Russ, I have very little faith that Ben Askren is going to get past 3 rounds, because if he gets hit cleanly by Jake Paul, I think he can get hurt. And I looked at all of the tape of him, Ben Askren, doing pads. His chin is well up in the air like this. Russ, this is Ben Askren doing pads. So I'm not very optimistic, although the conditioning wise and the mental fortitude of a fighter, I think, goes on his side.
But you know what? Would anybody care about Ben Askren coming to boxing if he wasn't fighting Jake Paul?
No, absolutely not.
So you know what? I think he owes a thank you to Jake Paul, win, lose, or draw, that that this is happening, because let's face it,
getting his biggest purse of his career. That's already been stated.
And that's not because of himself.
No, he has a following, but anyway. So look, I think we've talked enough about it. I really want to see the Regis Prograis Redkach fight. I think that could be very exciting. The time it lasts. I like Regis Prograis a lot. I think he's still a player in the 140 and eventually the 147-pound division if he chooses to.
He's a good fighter. He's a good fighter. This is a tough fight for Redkach. And Redkach, history's going to look back on him. Well, we will. Boxing people will look back and say, this guy fought guys, man. Like, he wasn't scared. He got knocked out, comes back and fight, takes on guys. They offer him fights. He takes it. Like, he doesn't back down from anybody. And he believes he can win. He talks it. He comes to fight. He doesn't run from you. He stays right in there. I was in his corner. I've been in his corner for a few fights, and I was in his corner for the fight against Danny Garcia. And there was a time in there when I turned to Jack Mosley, Shane's father, and I said, Jack, we're going to have to think about stopping this. And when he came back to the corner, we told him, you don't do something, we're going to stop the fight. You can't keep taking punishment like this. And while he never really maybe posed a threat to winning against Garcia, he came back and actually looked a little alive to stop us from stopping the fight and stayed in there. So, but he's taking a tough fight in Regis Prograis. Now, I'm imagining that Prograis is fighting over the 140 limit, or is Redkach having to come down to make it?
Well, I've seen it's a junior welterweight fight, but if it's for a non-title, usually there's some wiggle room. We'll see at the weigh-in officially, but it'll probably be somewhere along 140, 143. I
wonder how much that's going to hurt Redkach to make that, if he has to come down that low, because he's already a slim, lean guy. He's not a
junior welterweight or below before.
I'm sorry?
Redkach has been 140 or below before.
Yeah, but once you move up and your body moves up and you start fighting at 147 and you're strong and you do weight, you do strength and conditioning training, and you move up to fight at 147, coming back down is hard. In history, there's a whole bunch of cases loaded where guys move up in weight class and have success, and when they come back down, they suffer failure. The prime example is Ray Leonard. So, I'm just worried about how much he'll have to come down and take off, because like I said, I know him very well. He's a very lean guy. Like when you see him, like there's not a lot there to lose. And I'm just wondering if that's not going to be muscle mass coming off and weakening him, whereas Prograis is prime, and I like him. I think he's an outstanding fighter.
Any final thoughts, Mr. Anber, as we wrap up? It's already been the end of the show. It flew by, and of course we went over the scheduled time. That's usually something, if we had, a Bet99 prop of over under the duration of the show based on the pre-planning, which is not much, but some, we go overboard pretty much all the time.
Well, you're the producer. It's up to you to keep it in line. You're the producer. I'm the talent. You see, there's a difference here, right? You're supposed.
What's fun about the podcast? There's no commercial breaks. Being told that you got to leave, you got to break. We have 4 breaks to go. It's fun. We can decide.
Not true. We do have a commercial break. We have Bet99 is a commercial break. We have a commercial break, so don't say we don't have a commercial break.
It's a live read. It's not the same thing as a commercial break, but I get what you're saying. We have the flexibility of going as long as we want, but we try to keep it, of course, in well time.
My final thought is I'm looking forward to this weekend in everything from seeing not underrated, but undervalued fighters like Demetrius Andrade, to seeing people who aren't from the boxing world making their fame in the boxing world and making money in the boxing world. So I think it just goes to show that boxing, in terms of sports, is the true melting pot of the sporting world, and maybe even of society, because I don't know of many sports that attract from such different demographics than boxing does, and all over the world. And, everyone trying to prove how great they are and where they want to be and what they want to aspire to be. So, we can knock the Jake Pauls and the Askrens and all that of the world, but when the bell rings, they put themselves out there and they've got to fight, and somebody loses, and sometimes loses badly. So you got to tip your hat to the courage that they show for doing this. And, I think maybe to equate that is what happened last weekend with Ebony Bridges and Shannon Courtney, like you mentioned. Ebony has been somebody that's been out there, very sexually, very pretty, but more concerned about what lingerie she's going to wear, to the weigh-in, like how important that is. And she's a very beautiful woman, there's no doubt about it, but she has exploited that part of the sexuality probably more than any other female in boxing history. I don't know that there's anybody who's exploited. And everybody thought, no, man, she's just another pretty face. She's just exploiting her sexuality. Well, yeah, she was. But when the bell rang, she came to fight. And only 5 fights, she came to fight and did the best that she could and showed a lot of heart. So, you know what? I think at the end of the day, despite all the things that fighters do or where they come from, you got to tip your hat and have the respect for them when the bell rings, because they come to fight. So I'll leave it on that.
In the HBO final monologue, one of their final boxing shows ever, the quote was, "The purest form of athletic competition ever conceived, being boxing." I think there's some truth to that, based on what you just stated. So look, we're going to be able to recap that next week. We're going to be able to talk about, of course, upcoming fights. It's a busy time of the year. When spring gets around, we get closer to Cinco de Mayo. We got Canelo Sanders. We got a loaded month of May. We're going to have more fights announced, and hopefully some of the local scene as well, even though it's been taking a hit due to COVID. Mr. Anber, always a pleasure, and we'll be able to reconvene next week.
My brother, thank you very much. It was lovely talking with you once again, and it's so easy to talk boxing, and I see how we're able to go over the limit, over the time limit all the time. You know? I
Well,
see it.
and thank you everyone for tuning in to another edition of Calling Russ Anber. Tell a friend about us if you'd like. We enjoy your feedback. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
See you guys.